All right, guys, welcome back. I'm RDAP Dan, Federal Prison Time Consulting, and today we have a really special treat for all of you. Actually, it's more of a special treat for me, but you guys get to benefit and part of what we got going on here. So I want to first of all welcome Kathy Kaplan. How are you doing today, Kathy?
Hi, Dan. I'm doing great. Thanks. I'm super excited about this.
Awesome. Awesome. So Kathy Kaplan is somebody that has been through federal prison herself, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But more than her prison experience, which gives her complete credibility in the industry, Kathy is actually joining our team as a prison consultant. She's going to be the first person that we've brought onto our team as a prison consultant. We've yet to find somebody that had the right fit to work with us that has the ability to offer prison consulting to both men and women, but specifically her ability to help women process what they're going through separately from what it was in my experience. So Kathy, I want to thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today. And I definitely want to welcome you to the team. And I know everybody's really excited to hear what you got to say.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too.
So tell us a little bit about your journey. I know it kind of started in 2011 is when it all started, when you actually got into trouble.
Well, I was working for a company in Las Vegas. It was a large payday loan company online. They hired me to come in and start up their direct marketing, their direct mail offline program. So I was there about 3 years. And I left the company. I stayed on as a consultant for 6 months. And during that time, my husband and I were traveling. I got word that my previous assistant was taking some records from there and for an ex-executive. So I sent her an email saying, don't do that. You don't know who you're playing with here. And I should have stopped it. I could have, and I didn't. I should have turned her in, and I didn't. I was back into the company after I found out about it. I had perfect opportunity to turn her in, to tell them what was going on, and I didn't do that. A couple back and forth emails and whatnot with the executives. Well, my husband and I moved to Ecuador, where we live part-time, partly in the U.S., but mostly now here that I'm off probation and everything, in Ecuador. So we had just moved there. 3 months into it, went back to Las Vegas to visit my son, and I was arrested in early November of 2011. So my husband's in Ecuador. I'm arrested. I was put in the county detention for a couple days because I didn't want to talk to the FBI people right away until I understood what the charge was. And I had a lawyer on my side. So I spent a few days in the county jail. Then I went in front of the judge and they released me into my father's custody. I was 51 years old, but they released me into my father's custody, which was cool, better than jail. I entered my plea in January of 2013. I was sentenced in April. And then I surrendered to Bryan Federal Prison Camp in Texas in July of 2013. I had a 21-month sentence. I signed a plea agreement. The plea agreement, I asked for no supervised release, and I wasn't going to argue on the restitution amount. The government agreed to that, and then the judge gave me a 21-month sentence and 2 years supervised release. Although I was looking at 37 months when I walked in that morning for sentencing. So I felt like, I did pretty good on the 21 months. Not so much the supervised release, but.
And how much restitution did they hit you with?
$3.2 million.
When you first got in trouble, at first you might've been a little bit like, oh, this is going to blow over. But once it settled in, and you knew there was an opportunity of facing prison. You have children, you're married, your husband's in Ecuador, and he's not Ecuadorian, correct? Your husband is—
No, he's not. No,
he's an American who moved to Ecuador on your idea. It was your idea to go to Ecuador. And now he's in Ecuador, and you're stuck in the United States in a county jail.
Yeah.
How did you process this, and what was it like for you?
Well, at first, like you, I was like, okay, honey, just stay there in Ecuador. This is going to get cleared up in 2 or 3 months. And that's really what I thought. And then, denial, I guess. And then when I met with the government, they explained the law to me that as long as I knew what was going on and I didn't have to, actually steal the records, I was just as culpable and it was illegal. And I said, well, if that's the case, I'm guilty then, because I did not do the right thing. I did not turn her in. I did not turn him in. I didn't do anything. I allowed everything to go on. And I knew then that I was going to face prison time. Pretty quickly, I knew I was going to face prison time. And it was difficult, but I wanted my husband to stay here in Ecuador versus, selling our house and moving it all back there, because if I do spend time in prison, then he's not going to be able to help me anyway. So at least I had forward to.
What was your concept at that point in time, knowing you might be facing prison? How much did you know about prison? Have you been to jail before? Do you have a lot of friends that have been out of prison?
No, I didn't know one person that had ever spent time in prison. I didn't know anything, but at first I was very scared. I was, I sat in my little apartment that my dad rented and just sewed and trying to, ignore everything. And then about 4 or 5 months into it, I started slowly reading cases of my attorney, cases of my prosecutor, and familiarizing myself with the justice system. Because I had almost 2 years before, I was sentenced. So, just kind of waiting and hanging out. And I did all the research I could do. I read every single one of my attorney's cases, single one of the prosecutor's cases, everything that I could on this crime, which I didn't understand it, aiding and abetting, computer fraud, or it later got changed to theft of trade secrets, which I thought was a good thing since the company I worked for couldn't make a insurance claim against it. So I kind of lobbied for that as well. But I do remember the day signing the plea, and my husband was in Ecuador, and it was like I was on a 10,000-foot telephone pole, and he walked me down 1 feet at a time. I mean, just walked me down, because I didn't want to sign the plea. I didn't think it was, it was 100% accurate. I knew what I did was wrong, but I just had it, especially coming from the corporate world, having a charge of theft of trade secrets was, just awful to me. I knew I was a good person, but once I signed the plea, then I was able to start, making direct plans. I know for sure I'm going to prison now. I was looking at 37 months, and I wanted to make sure that everything was taken care of for my husband, for my children, for my grandchildren. I hired a consultant, and I just researched.
How far into the process did you hire the consultant?
Right after I entered my plea.
And at this point, you got in trouble in 2011 is when you found out about it, and you signed your plea.
Yes.
When?
In January 13.
Okay, so from 11 to 13, no prison consultant.
That's on my own, yes.
Okay. Now,
on my own.
Before we talk about a little bit about the prison consulting, and because I know you've told me how much this helped you,
yes.
and I know that prison consultant's no longer in the industry, so his name is irrelevant. But
right.
What was it like for your family? Remember, you and I are used to it. We've gone through it. We sometimes we got to bring ourselves back to what kind of questions did your family have for you? How old were your children? And what was going through their minds when you were trying to decipher all of this?
Yes, my daughter had moved to Ecuador with us, with her 2-year-old daughter, my grandchild. So that was very difficult. And then I have an identical twin sister who lived in Las Vegas, and a son who was, I want to say like 30 at the time, my son was. And he was not married, he was single. Of course, they were all concerned. My dad especially was very concerned, my husband. So when I hired the consultant, the first thing he did was, actually he flew in for my PSR interview to go with me, and he met with my family a couple times. Everybody in the same room. He answered all the questions that I didn't even know to ask. You know, the basic questions, safety and all that stuff, but also, you know, what is day in, day out life like? You know, how can we send her money? How can we, you know, whatever they could. And I never forgot, Dan, that I knew it was going to be easier on me than my family. I knew that it was going to be a struggle on my family. I knew that I could imagine what life was like every day in there, but their imagination is probably far worse than my reality. So that's one thing I never wanted to forget, was how hard it was going to be on them, and how to reassure them. Even when I was inside, you know, I never wanted to complain or have a bad thing to say, because there's nothing that can be done. And it just brings more grief onto my family.